and trained. In fact, I have the news articles out of large establishment East Coast newspapers from the early 1940s where the president's grandfather, George Bush's grandfather, Prescott Bush, actually was arrested and fined for trading with the enemy, running over 50% of Nazi steel production through Brown Brother Harriman. In fact, a headline on MSNBC reported that FDR's Auschwitz secret. Well, I'd talked to many B-17 pilots years ago who said they weren't allowed to bomb entire factories owned by General Motors, General Electric, and Ford, building Panzers for Hitler's war. Why did the globalists do this? Because the bankers were funding both sides and they stood to gain and profit from a protracted war. The bankers funded Stalin, Hitler, and the United States in England during World War II. FDR's Auschwitz secret. In fact, the London Guardian reported from now declassified secret documents that Hitler saw the Duke of Windsor, the man who would be king, as no enemy, U.S. files reveal. Well, of course, the Duke of Edinburgh lived in Germany during most of World War II and then escaped near the end to fascist Franco Spain. The British have engineered these disasters time and time again by controlling both sides of conflicts they take over in the aftermath. And who's one of the main banking families behind major wars going back to the battle at Waterloo? The Rothschild family, the family that bankrolled Europe. And every time we investigate a major scandal or a company being sucked dry before being imploded and pension funds being stolen, we run right into the Rothschild family, namely their British subsidiary, N.M. Rothschild. You also have the Crump family in Germany that owns many of the publishing companies in the world. They weren't prosecuted after World War II, certainly not. But their little creation Adolf Hitler and his minions were. And now we have the modern New World Order system. In March of 2002, I interviewed BBC reporter Greg Palast. He said the head of N.M. Rothschild, Lord Wakeham, who's on the head of Britain's censorship board, was trying to restrict him from breaking the story of 1,000 plus pages of secret World Bank and IMF documents. Mr. Palast interviewed the former head economist for the World Bank, Joseph Stiglitz. The former chief economist of the World Bank, Mr. Stiglitz, reported that the World Bank and IMF planned to implode the world economy. You see, the globalists print the money. They gain their power out of creating bubbles, then bursting those bubbles, creating depressions and recessions, and getting control of assets, corporations, and private property. The globalists control the boom and bust system. IMF unveils details of a plan for international bankruptcy system. What a scam. They go into third world countries, their documents show, pay off the leadership to not pay their debts, and then to sign over the natural resources and the population themselves, as well as their public lands, as collateral on a debt that the IMF and World Bank printed up off their printing presses at absolutely no cost to them. Think about the erosion of America's sovereignty. We have Mexico going to the Hague court to intervene on behalf of Mexicans on death row in the U.S. And guess what the World Court did? They told the U.S. Supreme Court to freeze Mexican executions. And guess what? The Supreme Court did exactly that. Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, "Oh, we definitely agree that you are the authority." Already, our courts under the control of the United Nations. And we have the International Criminal Court coming to life, and it doesn't even respect the basic rights contained in the Magna Carta, much less the Bill of Rights or Constitution. Meanwhile, we have the Pan-American Union forming, merging social security systems, merging law enforcement and military, as we said earlier. The EU is doing the same thing at the same time. EU poised for huge expansion to the east, 10 former Eastern Bloc nations merging with the EU, and they're quite at home in the socialist system. Another pretext the world government uses to get involved in sovereign nations is the drug war. And the evidence is clear. MI6, the CIA, Mossad, and other major intelligence agencies control the drug trade globally. In fact, after the globalists took over Afghanistan, opium production surged to record levels. That was another one of the little motives behind 9/11. Not just oil, not just weapon sales, not just the pretext to invade sovereign nations and empower this world government, but also that key belt of opium production. In fact, before 9/11, only about 10% of opium was being produced there with the poppies. Now it's over 60%. You know, I've been very frustrated in the 8 documentary films that I've produced because I could spend an entire program just covering one aspect of the New World Order. But to understand the total enslavement system they're designing for you and your family, that we're already deep into, but it's getting worse in the degrees, you need to have an understanding of the entire system and how it fits together in this web of tyranny and slavery. A key area that we need to look at is government-sponsored terrorism. How do the globalists get us to accept giving up our liberties and freedoms? Well, it's simple. They scare the daylights out of us with terrorist events they create. They pose as our saviors. We go to them asking for help, and they give us solutions that get the chains more tightly fitted to our ankles and mainly to our minds. Let's look at just a few examples of this, and they are voluminous. I would just hope that everyone out there visit Infowars.com on a daily basis to see even more examples of this. A long time ago in my study, I discovered that white supremacist, Hispanic supremacist organizations, almost all racial organizations in the world are actually founded, not just funded and controlled, by the globalist, by the MI6/CIA Mossad control arm. Whether it's Hamas, which Yitzhak Rabin, a former, he was assassinated, Israeli prime minister, admitted. In fact, UPI and Reuters and Haaretz, a major Jewish newspaper, have now admitted this. Why would Israel found Hamas, the group that engages in terror bombings? Because then the military state, military dictatorship that oppresses Jews as well as Palestinians, gets to maintain its control over the Middle East. It's its pretext for attacking its neighbors, expanding its boundaries, having police state controls, censorship over the Israeli media. This is how they maintain control. I mean, why does the mob, burn down your grocery store? So you'll buy protection from them. I mean, it's really simple. But with neo-Nazis especially, there's been cases here in Texas. They caught them in Fort Worth. The FBI created a Klan group back in the late 90s, tried to get them to blow up a chemical plant. The sheriff found out and stopped it. There have been countless examples that we've covered. But it just came out that the modern neo-Nazi groups in Germany were founded in 1963 by MI6, British intelligence. And it just broke in German courts that the entire leadership of the National Democratic